Welcome to the Newsome MMA podcast in association with MMA Play 365, giving you the edge in MMA betting. I'm your host as always, Newsome, with your co-host John, and tonight we're back once again to break down UFC 241 from Anaheim, California. John, how are you doing tonight, man?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. We're back. It's fight week. Man, what a card we've got in store. If people aren't excited about this card, I don't know what excites them because, man, I'm pumped for this card. I can't wait for the weekend to roll around, get to see the return of Nate Diaz, Yoel Romero, Paulo Costa, DC, Stipe. Oh, man, it's going to be great.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's in my opinion, it's the best fight card of the year so far. It's just one of those super cards, and definitely not one to be missed for sure. Just before we continue, there's a couple of things that I need to run by. So firstly, for those that didn't see the announcement that I made on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, this breakdown podcast will be recorded for pay-per-view events only moving forward. The betting advice platform MMA Play 365 has absolutely rocketed since the launch, and it's continuing to grow at a rapid rate. So unfortunately, my time is quite stretched right now, and MMA Play 365 has to take priority. Something I had to give, and we thought it'd be best just to move the podcast to cover pay-per-view events only. We didn't want to axe the podcast completely, as we both love talking fights for you guys, and obviously we know you guys love tuning into the show too. And as we're on the topic of MMA Play 365, we've had an amazing last couple of weeks. UFC Newark was an absolute goldmine. We hit a 4-0 sweep on the official bets with Colby Covington dominating, Jim Miller choking Guida to sleep, Nasrat Hakparas knocking Silver out cold, and Kennedy and Zechiku edging out a decision. The other fighter that was in the long-term gamblers section for a recommended bet that we didn't officially play was Matt Schnell, and he won via a first round submission too. Then the fun gamblers, 3 out of 4 of the parlays cashed, and we had so many betting slips sent to us from subscribers with people winning thousands of pounds and dollars in just one night. A crazy night. Then we move on to last weekend at UFC Uruguay. It was a strange night with a lot of unusual outcomes. However, we did end up cashing the official bets with Volkan Ozdemir knocking Latifi out, Rodolfo Vieira choking Pihota to sleep, and the only loss was Raulian Paiva that ended up losing via a doctor stoppage due to a bad cut. We had 2 parlays in the fun gamblers section that were only 1 leg away from winning, including a very questionable decision in the Gutierrez and De Freitas fight. So that's 2 winning events in total since the last episode, and we are 5-1 on events since we launched. And guess what? We still have our crazy offers available. Remember, it's only $198 for your first full year, or $30 per month, which can be cancelled at any time. So sign up today and start making money. And with that said, let's break down some fights at UFC 241. And in the main event of the Newsome MMA main card, the first fight is Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic 2. This is a heavyweight title fight and the baddest man on the planet title fight. So John, who have you got?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing this one played back. I mean, obviously we saw what happened in the first fight between the two of them back at UFC 226. That was July of last year. Obviously, DC won that fight in a really entertaining one-round fight, actually. I think people forget, I mean, it only lasted 4.5 minutes, but, man, they were an entertaining 4.5 minutes that we got to see between the two of them. And I think this fight is going to play out very differently, actually. I think this is going to be a lot closer. I don't think we're going to see anyone finished early. I think both guys will actually be a bit more cautious, because if you watch that fight back, I mean, the two guys are just swinging pretty much straight away. I mean, there's a little bit of clinch work. I mean, both guys seemed happy to initiate the clinch against one another. But then when they got into the middle of the octagon, man, the two guys were trading. They just wanted to stand there and throw punches and exchange. And yeah, I think we'll see a different approach from the two guys in this fight. I think first and foremost, I think Stipe will be a bit more cautious. I think he'll be a bit more hesitant in throwing those big combinations, and especially coming out of the clinch as well. So obviously we saw the finish was as a result of coming out of the clinch, and DC had done his homework there, saw that Stipe keeps his hands down and landed a big shot that put him to sleep straight away. And yeah, I think this fight is going to play out differently between the two of them. I think it's going to go into the deeper rounds, and I wouldn't even be surprised if we saw it go to the judges' scorecards. Now, for me, man, I'm really excited to see how this plays out, because a couple of things. Firstly, we haven't seen Stipe in there since the loss against DC, so he's been out for some time. Obviously, he's been vying for this rematch. So, obviously, what differences will we see in Stipe? What changes will we see in his game planning and things like that? Obviously, he's had a long time to work on this rematch with DC, so it's going to be interesting to see how he changes, how he adopts his game plan to face one of the greatest of all time in Daniel Cormier. And secondly, Daniel Cormier. Obviously, we know he fought a bit more recently. He defeated Derek Lewis at UFC 230. That was in November last year. That was a relatively comfortable victory for him. Wasn't really in danger throughout the entirety of that fight. It only lasted a couple of minutes into the second round. But obviously, I know that heavyweights have this longer lifespan in the game and things, but DC's 40 years old now. He's spoken about retirement several times. I think his timeline was that he was going to retire by March of this year. Obviously that hasn't happened. There was talk of super fights against Brock Lesnar. Now John Jones has started piping up on Twitter again, saying, the fight between those two is never going to happen again. DC isn't going to want it. He definitely doesn't want to come back down to light heavyweight. And just these things, just a bit of time off, obviously with his age, just with everything that I've just mentioned, is that going to have any effect on his on the way he fights? I mean, DC's a professional guy. We know that. We know he always turns up to fight. We know he always turns up in shape when he's in the octagon, and he doesn't take any opponent lightly. But I just wonder if these things. I mean, he's expecting that huge payday against Brock. Didn't happen. Now John Jones has started piping up. Will that be playing in the back of his mind? Will he be thinking, if I win this fight against Stipe and get this over and done with, then we could have that trilogy fight and possibly get it at my weight? I know John Jones has said he's not particularly interested in the heavyweight fight between the two of them, but I just wonder if that will have any impact on his mentality going into the fight. So yeah, for me, this is going to be a really interesting fight. Now, what I did like in the fight between the two of them previously was the amount of combinations that Stipe was putting together. I mean, it did leave him a little bit vulnerable to being countered, and he did absorb some shots, but he did catch DC with some heavy 1-2s in that fight, and I think he needs to utilise more of the same, but with slightly more head movement, a bit more movement on the outside as well. I mean, he's the taller, longer guy. He's probably... I don't want to say he's the better boxer too, because they're both good boxers, but he'll probably feel that his boxing is stronger than DC's boxing. DC will feel he has the advantage in the clinch work and things like that. But again, in the first fight, we saw Stipe also, although very briefly, he did manage to take Daniel Cormier down, and he tried to jump on the back very early on in the first round. Obviously, that will give him some positives and some stuff to work on for this fight as well. But ultimately, I think this fight is going to play out with the same winner as the initial fight. I think that Daniel Cormier is one of the best around. I mean, besides John Jones, who is his kryptonite, there's not very many better than him. There's not very many guys that he's going to beat Daniel Cormier. As I say, he always turns up. He's always in shape, so I think he can go 5 hard rounds if he needs to. I think he will. I think this will be a bit more of a grindy affair, which I think will suit Daniel Cormier's style more than Stipe's. I think, like I say, I think they'll not be so aggressive this time, just standing in the middle trading. Again, I've said, as I said earlier, I think that'll be more so on Stipe's behalf, because you saw what happened when he got involved in those exchanges, and the two of them came together in the middle to clinch rather than clinching on the fence. I think maybe that he'll be a bit more tentative, which will possibly allow Daniel Cormier to push him back against the fence and clinch up against there, which is probably what he prefers, to try and obviously work for the takedown, work for that high crotch that he's known for. So yeah, I think Stipe is going to adapt his game slightly and be a little bit less aggressive, which I think plays into Daniel Cormier's hands a bit more. I think, and I do think this fight is going to go into the later rounds. I do think it's going to go to a decision, actually. I don't think either of these two guys is going to finish the other one unless it's very late on. The two guys are tired, and possibly I could see DC finishing Stipe if he manages to take him down and maybe take his back, get his neck or anything like that. But yeah, I think this is going to go into deep waters. I think it's going to be a really fun fight. I think it's going to be, I think we're going to see a bit of everything. Hopefully we won't see as many DC eye pokes as last time, because man, watching that fight back and seeing some of the clips on social media this week, a few of those did look a bit naughty, did look a bit intentional. It looked like he was flicking the jab out and then extending those fingers to intentionally aim at Stipe's eyes. But Obviously, only DC knows whether he did that with bad intentions or whether it was purely accidental. But yeah, I'm going with DC to win this fight. I think he's going to win a hard-fought 5-round contest, but it's going to be hands still for me. Daniel Cormier to win via decision.
Yeah, man. I think another guy that might be able to give us a little bit of insight into those eye pokes is my boy Santiago Ponzinibbio. I'm sure he'd be able to tell us. But yeah, man, I love this fight. I love this rematch. The reason why I love this rematch is because I feel that the outcome of the last fight with DC knocking Miocic out in the first round, I feel like it was a bit of an anomaly performance. I'm not sure how many times that happens if they fought 10 times. And the other reason why I love this rematch is because I feel that there's so many more factors in this fight that we just didn't get to see last time because it ended so quickly. And when we broke that fight down last time, I was talking about how I think the striking is going to be really interesting, and the wrestling and the grappling might just take a little while to get into the flow of, but it will eventually, and all that sort of stuff. And obviously, it didn't pan out like that at all because, as you've already mentioned, it finished in round 1. But I feel that this fight will be what I thought we were going to see in the last fight. So I think the striking is going to be quite even again. I know DC looked good coming forward in combinations, and Miocic. I think actually Stipe was a little surprised of how accurate and powerful DC was moving forward and how much pressure he put on him. I think that Stipe was expecting DC to back off a little bit and not be the aggressor, because Stipe was on a 6-fight winning streak before that, and the majority of those fights was Stipe pushing forward. There was a couple that weren't, but predominantly he's been the aggressor in his fights. He's been the one that his opponent's been cautious of, being a little, I wouldn't say scared, I don't believe any fighter's scared of anybody, but just a little hesitant. But when DC came out and he wasn't hesitant, he wasn't prepared to be on the back foot, and he was prepared to come forward and strike and in combinations, I think that really it really took Miocic back a bit and just thought, oh shit, I didn't expect this. But I do feel that, like I say, there's so many facts in this fight. The fact that they're both high-level wrestlers, obviously DC slightly more credentialed, but in regards to MMA wrestling, which is what matters here, Stipe is as good as they come as well, and he will be able to, defend. He will be able to defend takedowns. He will be able to use offensive wrestling in this fight as well, and we haven't really seen, apart from the John Jones fight, we haven't really seen DC tested too much in the defensive wrestling department. So, like I say, there's a lot of factors that I think will play into it, but I tend to agree with you a little bit, John. I do feel that Miocic isn't going to be or expecting to be as aggressive in this fight. I do think that this is his chance of redemption, a chance of redemption that I personally think that Miocic thought he wasn't going to get. So he's got a chance to come back in and avenge that loss and get his title back. Because let's be honest, if either of these guys lose the title, that'll be it. Lose this fight, that'll be it for title shots, in my opinion. I just genuinely think that the heavyweight division's changing, and DC obviously, as you've already mentioned, John, he's getting on a little bit now. He's talking about retirement. He's got a comfortable job as a commentator and analyst as well, so he's not going to be short of work. And then, like I say, Miocic, I feel that we've potentially seen the best Miocic whilst he was on that run. So I think because of that, Miocic isn't going to be. I think he's going to try and use his time a lot better, is what I'm trying to say. He's got 5 rounds to work, and I think that's going to be conscious. And again, John, I agree. I think they're both they're going to be a little bit tentative at first. There's definitely going to be a large feeling out process here, because I feel that DC may believe that quick knockout won't happen again, and Miocic, because of that quick knockout, I feel he'll want a little bit of time in there first. So there's going to be a feeling out process, but eventually both guys are going to come forward. Both guys are going to strike. And even though DC knocked Miocic out last time, I do think that, again, as I've already mentioned, the striking's quite even for different reasons. Cormier comes forward with straight, accurate shots in bunches, whereas Miocic is a lot more technical, and he does generate I think, more power behind his shots. Like I say, I know he got knocked out, but I do think Miocic generates a little bit more power because of the technique advantage. So for different reasons, I think they're quite even on the feet, and I genuinely feel this fight is going to be won and lost with wrestling, grappling, and cardio. And I think as the longer the fight goes on, with DC being the slightly shorter guys closer to the hips, the entries to the takedowns are going to be a little easier for him opposed for Miocic, because I think for Miocic to get that low, he's going to be risking uppercuts and just getting tied up with DC. And this is another game of another side of DC's game that is just phenomenal, and that's his grinding clinch game. He's so powerful in the clinch, and he can pin guys up to the fence and just hit them with these short, sharp shots. So I feel Miocic is going to struggle getting his wrestling game going. I think the best chance for Miocic to get on top of DC, which is his best path to victory in this fight, is potentially a scramble, reversing a position in a scramble whilst he's defending a takedown of DC maybe, and getting on top that way. I think it's going to go to a decision as well. I also think both guys are going to have moments where they could potentially finish this fight, but I feel that the longer the fight goes on, the more it'll drain both the cardios. Then once the cardios are a little drained, I think the power is going to be drained a little bit from each guy. So I think a knockout is going to be unlikely later in the fight. Then I think that because of the cardio, the takedowns may be a little bit harder to score from both sides, because once they're both tired, both can still defend well from a wrestling perspective. And then it's going to become sort of a slow, grindy clinch game where, one fight is going to have that bit more in the tank, one fight is going to have that dominance on the cage. And I think that fight is going to be Daniel Cormier. So I'm going to take Daniel Cormier to win again. I'm going to take the daddest man on the planet to remain the world heavyweight champion, the baddest man on the planet. I'm taking Daniel Cormier to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight on the Newsome MMA main card, again, it's another great fight. The co-main event, we've got Anthony Showtime Pettis versus Nate Diaz. John, who have you got?
Man, how can you not be excited for this fight? I mean, this is a lot of people are saying this is the people's main event, and I can understand why. I mean, we were seeing the return of Nate Diaz. Obviously, we haven't seen him in the octagon for 3 years now. I mean, it was August of 2016 when he lost in the Conor McGregor rematch. I mean, I can't believe that 3 years have passed since that fight, and B, I can't believe that we've seen Nate Diaz back in the octagon, to be honest, because so many times we hear his name mentioned that there might be a fight coming up, and it doesn't come to fruition, and here we are. He's going up against Anthony Pettis. I mean, Showtime, I know he alternated wins and losses in his last two fights, but he seems to have gained in popularity, and people just want to see him fight. He's falling into the same category as people like as Tony Ferguson and Nate Diaz, just engaging in things just for his new entertaining style. I mean, we first saw that in the Tony Ferguson loss. Obviously, he broke his hand end of the second round. The fight was stopped, but I feel like we saw a new Anthony Pettis after that fight. I mean, people have always kind of questioned Pettis. His heart and things like that. When he goes up against the grindy people like Dos Anjos and Eddie Alvarez, people like that, he struggles. And then people have said that he sometimes takes the easy way out. Obviously, he lost to Dustin Poirier, while some people say he tapped out to a body triangle, which in theory he did. Obviously, he had that injury as well, but that injured rib, which he'd hurt throughout the fight. But I mean, from the Tony Ferguson fight and going into the Stephen Thompson fight, I mean, he seems to have found a new. He seems to be more resolute, and especially that Tony Ferguson fight. I mean, there's a fantastic image of him over the top of standing over the top of Tony Ferguson, kind of lapping up the blood that's pouring down his face and looking like he's loving every second of it. I mean, he's going to be doing the BJ Penn, licking the blood off the gloves and all sorts. I mean, so you can imagine how hyped people are for this fight, and I understand why, because it's going to be one of those fights where they just stand in the middle and they trade. And I don't think either guy's going to particularly want to go for a takedown. Either guy's going to want to wrestle. Either guy's going to want to do much on the ground unless it's part of a finishing sequence in the fight. I think they're just going to want to stand and trade and punch it out. And if anybody saw the interview with Nate Diaz and for ESPN this week, I mean, he's just some of the things he says are hilarious. But I mean, he's just an out-and-out gangster, man. He just wants to fight. He just wants to fight people. He just wants to fight people who'll stand there and fight him and exchange punches with him. And that's why Diaz brings in fans and has become a lot more popular over the last few years. Now, people who follow me on social media will know that I'm sometimes quite critical of Nate Diaz, and that's not because I don't like him. I actually love the guy. I think he's brilliant. I think he's brilliant for the sport. I think I think him and his brother are fantastic characters. Like I say, they're bad guys. They're proper gangsters. They're proper fighters. They're old school. They turn up and just want to scrap people. They don't care about all the fancy stuff like the interviews and the media side of things. They just want to fight. But I mean, when you look at Nate Diaz, I mean, the reason it bugs me sometimes is because he's got a lot of hype off that first Conor McGregor win, and it was a good win. We all know that, but I mean, when you look through his career, obviously he has suffered multiple losses. I don't think I mean, it's hard to say he's not one of the biggest draws in the sport, because he is one of the biggest draws in the sport now because he beat McGregor. But before that, he wasn't a particularly big draw. I mean, he was a draw, but he wasn't this huge draw, and that's where it troubles me. It's kind of similar to Masvidal now as well in the welterweight division. He kind of is getting all this hype because of his last couple of performances, but these guys have been around for years and years, and people weren't hyping them up until one or two fights ago. And I understand that there's bandwagons, and obviously you can only kind of follow the current form of fighters and things like that, but that's why I sometimes maybe come across as a little harsh on Nate Diaz when I say that he's not as good as people make out. I mean, he's a fantastic fighter, and no, I'm not taking that away from him, but yeah, I do sometimes think he gets overhyped because of that McGregor win. But that's going off on a bit of a tangent. Back to this fight, the two of them are going to stand there and trade, as I said. Obviously, Diaz, we know, has got fantastic boxing. Pettis he's more of a kicker. I mean, he's got that fantastic background in I think it's Taekwondo, his original background, and obviously we see that in his fights as well. Especially in the Stephen Thompson fight, in his last fight, he was utilising a lot of leg kicks. He's utilising that body kick whenever he can, and then he'll throw in the crazy spinning kicks and things like that. And upper weight class now as well, he seems to have that power. We saw that in the Wonderboy knockout. It was just kind of a bit of an innocuous Superman punch off the cage that actually fully KO'd Thompson as well. Thompson didn't really know what was going on. It wasn't like he just knocked him down and put him away with the follow-up strikes. He was down as soon as that shot connected with him. So it's going to be very much a boxer versus someone who's going to want to kick from the outside. And this is where I think Nate Diaz could become unstuck, because obviously we know he leans very heavily on that lead leg. Southpaw style, leans very heavily on that leg. We saw Conor McGregor utilise leg kicks. I mean, McGregor doesn't really utilise a lot of low kicks. He sometimes uses that oblique kick and things like that, but he doesn't really utilise your standard leg kicks. He doesn't really tend to utilise like body kicks other than the teeps and things like that. I mean, I know he'll utilise that spinning kick to the body, but your traditional kicks that we see Pettis use a lot, the low calf kick, the body kicks and things like that, I think this is where Nate could come unstuck a bit, especially as we also don't know how he's going to look after 3 years out. I mean, he always stays in shape. Him and his brother do all their triathlons, things like that. He's always going to have cardio, but there's a difference between cardio and actually getting in there and fighting and against a guy who's fought a lot recently as well and fought good guys like say Tony Ferguson, Stephen Thompson. So for me, that's my big worry about Nate, whether he's going to his lead leg's going to get chewed up. We saw it in the Benson Henderson fight. He was just taking kick after kick. We've seen it in some of the other fights as well, where the leg kick is the lead point of attack, and Pettis can do that now. On the other hand, my worry for Pettis is if Nate Diaz really pushes the pace, and he has got the cardio to push the pace, similar to Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson was really, really pushing the pace and backing Pettis against the fence. And when Pettis backs against the fence, he can't use those kicks, and then it kind of turns into just a boxing match. And in a boxing match between the two, I fancy Nate Diaz to get the better of the exchanges. So it's again a really intriguing matchup and a really fantastic stylistic matchup. And both these guys as well, if the fight does hit the mat for any reason, if Diaz catches a kick or anything like that, both guys are really good on the ground, both on top and off their back. So just everywhere this fight goes, it's going to be interesting. Now, are we going to see Diaz push the pace as much as Tony Ferguson? That is the real question that I keep asking myself when I'm thinking about this fight and how it's going to go down. I mean, he has got ridiculous cardio, we know that, but if you watch that Tony Ferguson fight back, he literally sprinting after Pettis everywhere. He's just constantly in his face. And I don't think Diaz is as in your face as that. I mean, he has got ridiculous cardio, but I don't think he's as in your face as Tony Ferguson was in that fight. And if he's not, I'm actually picking Anthony Pettis to win this fight via a decision. I think that he'll be able to utilise kicks against the southpaw Diaz. I think he's going to be able to use the low kick a lot. I think there'll be a lot of movement. I do think there'll be a lot of exchanges where they both stand and trade. But yeah, I think if Pettis is sensible in this fight, and by sensible I don't mean hang back and not throw things. I mean sensible is in staying on the outside in his kicking range, ensuring that Diaz can't just march him down the way that Tony Ferguson did. I really do think that that Pettis can take a very close decision, and I do think if it goes, I do think the fight will go to a decision first and foremost. But I do think it'll be a very, very close decision either way, whoever wins this fight. But I am going to pick Anthony Pettis to win this fight. I do just think that he's going to be able to utilise his kicks, and I just feel that Diaz won't apply as much pressure as Tony Ferguson did, which I think will give Pettis a little bit of breathing room and that little bit of space, that little bit of time to really pick out those kicks, really chop down the lead leg. I think that'll frustrate Nate, and he'll then start marching forward and walking onto things. And yeah, I think I do think Nate has his moments. I think he does catch Pettis. He's got a really nice 1-2. Pettis does tend to get caught a lot. I mean, Wonderboy was busting him up with a jab. Nate's got a nice jab. Tony Ferguson was busting him up. We know that. But yeah, I do think that Pettis is going to win this fight. I think he's going to win a very close decision. And yeah, I think it's going to be a fantastic fight. But I'm picking Anthony Pettis to win this fight via the narrowest of decisions.
Yeah, it's a great fight, man. And, you know, a couple of things really surprised me about this fight. The first thing is, you know, both fighters, between them, have got 60 professional fights, 30 on each side, ironically. And, you know, they've both been around for so long at the top level. Yet, like I said in the Jim Miller and Clay Guida fight a couple of weeks ago, I'm really surprised that these guys have never met before. And,
yeah,
you know,
definitely.
I'm glad they are meeting right now, and it's not too late either. The second thing I'm really surprised about is, actually, when you look back, it's hard to believe that we haven't seen Nate Diaz since the second Conor McGregor fight, which just feels crazy. It feels so long ago, and so much has happened since that fight. But yeah, I mean, onto the fight itself, it's great. And, you know, first and foremost, the reason why stylistically this is such a fun fight is because both fighters' strengths are the other fighters' weaknesses. So what I mean by that, and you touched upon it as well, John, Nate Diaz is a southpaw, predominantly likes to box on the feet. But the problem with Nate and his southpaw stance and his boxing, like I've just spoke about, is he leads very heavy on that lead leg, almost to the point where everything comes from it. So if you can take that leg out and take that and stop his mobility, then honestly, the fight becomes so easy. Like I say, it's not often you see a fighter that stands that heavy on the leg. Now, what would surprise me, but would be smart at the same time, is if Nate Diaz came out and had more of a flowy sort of movement, you know, wasn't so heavy on that lead leg, bounced around a little bit more. But listen, we're 30 fights into Nate Diaz's pro career, and I genuinely don't think that we see any sort of change. So with that being said, Pettis is got his taekwondo background, his kickboxing background. He's a kicker. That's what he's known for. That's what he's always been known for. And he has the ability to take out that leg, low calf kick, shut that leg down. And once Nate's movement isn't that, he's not that mobile as it is. He's just more of a zombie forward pressure stalking you. So if you can really take out that leg and slow him down, slow his movement down more than what it is already, then I'm telling you, it then becomes an easy fight. However, on the flip side, Pettis, he is an orthodox striker, like I've already mentioned, a kicker, taekwondo background, kickboxing, all that good stuff. And his weakness in MMA is forward pressure boxing. We saw that in the Tony Ferguson fight. I know you've made a few references to that fight, John, and I'm going to in this breakdown as well. I think it's a good fight to make references of, which I'll explain a little bit about later. But we saw that in the Tony Ferguson fight, the forward pressure boxing. And that really gets to Pettis. That's his weakness. Now, what's Nate Diaz's strength? It's forward pressure boxing. So this is what I mean. The fight from a stylistic perspective is so interesting because one of the styles has to come good at the end of the night. And I actually think the opening round will decide where this fight goes and who wins, because I think if Pettis doesn't get off on that leg, on the leg kick early, taking out that lead leg of Nate is gonna come strong towards the end of the fight anyway, in my opinion, regardless of what happens in to his leg in those opening rounds. So I think he's gonna come on strong regardless. Now, for Pettis to win this fight, he has to win the earlier rounds. So he has to start hitting that leg early. He has to start racking up points while he's fresh. Now, I don't think we're going to see Pettis tire too much. He's already been in there once at welterweight, so I always have these red flags when fighters move up and down weights, especially when it's later in the career. So, strength, conditioning, cardio, power, speed, movement, all that sort of stuff. And the main thing, and I say it time and time again, a fighter needs that one fight at the new weight, just so they can have a feel of, because fighters are very aware about the body, they're constantly aware of what they're putting in the body, how the body feels, because it's the job. So a fighter likes to feel that their body at that new weight at least once, just so they know what to expect the next time. And Pettis has felt that, so I don't think Pettis is going to tire. But like I say, I do think Nate's going to come on strong. So if Pettis manages to lose that first round, I think he's going to lose the fight, because I feel that Nate's going to take round 3 and he's going to be pushing forward at the end of round 2. So if Nate takes the first round, I think it's going to be a really bad night for Pettis. But there's a few things in the styles that I feel that Pettis can nullify Diaz. So Diaz has got a good jab. He likes to throw that out there. And really, a lot of the stuff that Diaz throws in regards to his strikes comes from that jab, and it's, we don't see it enough in MMA. We need to see jabs more because they're so effective. But if Pettis plays a nice hand game here, because this is a southpaw and orthodox fight, if Pettis plays a hand game, follows the jab of Nate Diaz, with his own hand and just makes things a little bit awkward, it's going to be a battle for the jab, and it's not going to be easy for Nate to land. Now, if this was southpaw versus southpaw, like it was in the McGregor fight, the jab lands a little bit more because it's coming to the open face. There's not the battle for the lead hand. So if Pettis is really smart here in his striking, and he mixes in kicks with a battle, with the hand fighting and just being really smart and really switched on with his lead hand, I think he can really nullify that jab of Diaz, which will then shut a lot of the striking game down from Diaz, and then Pettis can take over later down the fight. Now, if he doesn't, and he allows Diaz to come forward, he allows Diaz to land the jab and follow it up with the 2 and mixing combinations, Pettis is just going to get chewed up. But I also agree with you, John. The reason why I'm gonna reference referencing the Tony Ferguson fight is because I feel that the way Tony Ferguson fights is the closest fighter that Pettis has fought recently, at least, to what Nate Diaz brings to the table inside the cage. So Ferguson comes forward with some crazy pressure and he's constantly in your face, and Diaz is the same. But I think that Diaz is an easier fight than Tony Ferguson, and the reason I say that is because Tony Ferguson literally doesn't stop. He's constantly in your face. He'll fucking run towards you if there's enough distance. and he'll just constantly, like I say, he's a nightmare to be in the cage against, just because he's always in your face, and if he's not, he'll make sure he's in your face quicker than you can blink. So Nate Diaz doesn't have that sort of movement. He will stalk, he will move forward constantly, and he will try. His end goal will be to try and get in your face and pocket box and try and light you up. But with a little bit of additional movement from Pettis, I think he'll have a lot more success, exiting, making the distance greater, gaining that distance advantage than what he did in the Tony Ferguson fight, because the pressure just won't be as great from Nate Diaz. So I do think that Pettis can manage this fight really well, but I just think it's inevitable towards the end of the fight that Nate Diaz is going to come on strong. I think that the other thing as well, just to quickly mention, is Pettis has got some sneaky power, man. Wonderboy, who has never been knocked out, never been finished via TKO, and Pettis went in there and flatlined him. So I think that tells you a lot about the power that Pettis is carrying up to welterweight. And, you look back at the Tony Ferguson fight, Pettis had Ferguson all kinds of hurt with the hands. So Nate Diaz does have to be careful. We saw him drop 2 or 3 times against Conor McGregor. I know Conor's got power, but listen, so's Pettis as well. And in a round where you drop a fighter, unless the fighter that got dropped absolutely beats the dog piss out the other dude in that round, the round is always going to be scored to the fighter that dropped his opponent, even if he was losing that fight up until that point and there's 10 seconds left. You drop your opponent, you're going to win the round. So I think if Pettis can drop Diaz, which I actually think he is going to, in maybe once, twice, I'm not sure. I do think he's going to catch Diaz and drop him at some point. I don't think he finishes him. Diaz is too tough. But I just see various ways that Pettis can win rounds in this fight. Like I say, though, he's got to continue with those leg kicks throughout the fight. The reason McGregor dropped off in his fight with Diaz is because he started with the leg kicks that were great, but then he stopped and Diaz came forward, started putting the pressure on, changed the fight completely, and that's a possibility in this fight as well. If Pettis doesn't keep at those kicks and starts falling in love with his hands a little bit more, Diaz will take over the fight. He'll win round 2, he'll win round 3, and he'll take a decision. Either way, I think the fight is going to go to a decision, but I think Pettis takes the first couple of rounds. I think he does stay disciplined with his kicks, and I can see Anthony Pettis taking a decision. So I'm going Anthony Showtime Pettis to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight on the Newsome MMA main card, we've got Yoel Romero versus Paulo Costa. John, who have you got?
Yeah, the third fight in a row where you can't be anything other than excited to see how this fight's going to play out. I mean, obviously we've got Yoel Romero, the 42-year-old soldier of God that just doesn't seem to age, going up against the the equally as chiseled Paulo Costa. I mean, it's kind of old versus new. I know obviously Costa's not massively young, 28 years old, but I mean he seems to have just over the last couple of years really come onto the scene and has been making waves, knocking everybody out in his path, and now he's facing the former title challenger in Yoel Romero. Obviously, we haven't seen him in action since that very close split decision loss to Robert Whittaker back in June last year. Firstly, that even after watching it about 10 times, that fight's still too hard to call as to who won it. And also, I'm glad that he's had this time off to heal up from that fight, because man, that was a 5-round war, and I'm glad that he's given his body time to heal up, and he's given himself the opportunity to just get 100% healthy again and 100% ready to get back in the octagon and fight. And he's going to need it going up against a fellow powerhouse in Paulo Costa. Like I say, Costa's got that heavy power in his hands. He's got heavy power in his kicks. He can knock guys out at the blink of an eye, as we saw in the Uriah Hall fight, which was his last fight. That fight, actually, Uriah Hall had some good moments. He actually rocked Costa in the second round, I think it was, not long before the finish. But as he kind of rushed in, Costa just caught him with the short shot, and that put Uriah Hall on skates, and then he followed it up with ripping the shots to the body, and it was good night. So Costa is always a dangerous guy, but for me, I think this fight is a little bit too soon for Paulo Costa. When you look at his record and look at the guys who's gone up against, Uriah Hall is a very mixed bag. Sometimes he turns up and he's fantastic. Quite often than not, he doesn't, unfortunately. Johnny Hendricks was the fight before that. Johnny Hendricks, UFC 217. He was pretty washed up by then, unfortunately. He was very small for middleweight as well. Obviously, he was forced to move up because he couldn't make welterweight, but just physically, his frame didn't suit middleweight at all. And then you've got guys like Gareth McClellan on the record as well. And yeah, he hasn't gone up against any real top competition yet, in my opinion. He hasn't gone up against someone who really knows what they do, who's real top end of the division, top quality fights in all aspects of mixed martial arts. And he's going up against that in Yoel Romero. Yoel's a good striker. People forget that he's obviously got his Olympic wrestling background. People think he's just saying out wrestler, but he's not, man. He's an explosive freak. I mean, he'll look like he's not doing anything. He looked like he's not got anything in mind. He's not going to throw any strikes or anything like that. Then out of nowhere, he'll just throw one or two bombs, or that ridiculous jumping knee that he's knocked the likes of Chris Weidman and people like that out cold. And yeah, he's just such a dangerous and explosive guy, and he has always got that wrestling to fall back on. People, unless you've watched the fight back with Uriah Hall, some people might forget Uriah Hall did actually shoot like a bit of a blast double in that fight and managed to take Costa down. And that concerns me a bit, going up against the Olympic wrestler in Yoel Romero. I mean, he managed to take Robert Whittaker down, I think, 3 times in their last fight, although Bobby Knuckles does get back to his feet very quickly. Whittaker has got extremely good takedown defense as well, and he still managed to take him down 3 times. So I just feel in this fight that it's just going to come too soon for Paulo Costa. I think Yoel Romero is going to use all of his experience. He's going to know the right times to clinch. He's going to know the right times to wrestle. He's going to know the right times when to throw out those explosive strikes. Fighting over 3 rounds now. Obviously, people have worried before against Romero about Romero's gas tank. It doesn't worry me now, fighting over 3 rounds against Costa when he's gone 5 hard rounds with Whittaker on a couple of occasions. Obviously, people talking about the striking ability of Costa. Yes, he's a very good striker. Yes, he hits very hard. But Romero's gone up against a good striker in Luke Rockhold as well. And look what happened in that fight. Rockhold may not hold the same power as Costa, but technically he's every bit the striker that anyone else is at middleweight. And Romero knocked him out cold as well. So for me, I think this is going to be a pretty foregone conclusion for Yoel Romero. I mean, I'm not saying that Costa stands no chance, because he does. There's always, when you have such power and you are such a good striker, there is always a chance you're going to win. And obviously, let's not forget, Romero has struggled sometimes. He has been hurt sometimes. Drakkar had some success against him in that very close split decision. Going back, I know this is going back 5 years, but Tim Kennedy as well. Tim Kennedy should have had that fight, man. Tim Kennedy rocked him and nearly put him away. And then there was the Stoolgate incident, and yeah. Romero can be rocked if you catch him. Costa has power, so obviously that's a recipe for a potential finish. But yeah, I think that will be, as you mentioned earlier in the DC and Stipe fight, I think that'll be an anomaly result if these two guys fought 10 times over now. I just think Romero's too good for him. I think he's too experienced for him. I think he will utilise his wrestling. I think he might utilise it quite early to perhaps wear on Costa and try and take away some of that power, so he can then start utilising some of his explosive striking skills himself. And yeah, I think that Yoel Romero is going to get this done, and it wouldn't surprise me again if we saw another Yoel Romero 3rd round finish. I think Costa may tire if Yoel keeps taking him down and keeps wearing on him and then keeps landing heavy shots. And then, as we saw in the Uriah Hall fight, you can get to Costa as well. You can hurt him as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if later in the fight, maybe Yoel lands a big shot and the fight goes to the mat and he tries to wrap up a submission, or he just hammers away with those beast arms of his and forces the ref to jump in. But I'm going with Yoel Romero to win this fight, and I think he's going to win via finish in round 3.
Yeah, man, I mean, let's not get mixed up. Yoel Romero is a genetic freak, and I do not mean that as an insult in any way whatsoever, that is absolutely a compliment. I mean, look at the dude. He's 42 years old and he's just stacked. Like, 42-year-olds should not look like that. And man, people talk about USADA and stuff like that, but I'm sure I saw a report maybe last year, I think it was, Yoel Romero is was one of the most tested athletes under USADA in the UFC. So either he's got shares in USADA and he's dodging that bullet each time, or he is genuinely clean. Now he comes from an Olympic wrestling background. You know, he's been a dedicated athlete all his life. I genuinely believe he's clean. Like I say, I just think he's a genetic freak, a freak of nature, and you know, every so often you're going to get a human being, or if he is even human for that matter, that looks like that. And this is just Yoel Romero. Now, obviously, I've just mentioned the Olympic wrestling background, silver medalist. The dude has got explosive wrestling. As I mentioned in the Colby Covington and Robbie Lawler breakdown a couple of weeks ago, he hasn't got the best top control, but the fact that he can explosive, well, it's still a different takedown to Colby, but the fact that he can get fights down pretty much when he wants them down, is a similar sort of thing, is what I mean. And that's gonna play a factor in every fight that he has, because he's gonna have that huge advantage over his opponents because of that credentialed wrestling background. But like you said, he's so explosive on the feet as well. You know, he's a southpaw. He's got a hard straight left. He'll loop the left. He'll hook it. He's got a good jab. He's got kicks. He'll mix it in together. We saw in the last Whittaker fight that he took a completely different approach, in my opinion, and there's one or two reasons behind that. Either he thought he tried the wrestling route the first time against Whittaker and it didn't work, so he'll try something else, or he just thought that this is a second opportunity, maybe try a different approach to see if he can take the fight, you know, in a different way. And you know, we saw a completely different Romero. It was low volume early on. There wasn't many takedown attempts. And, you know, he still nearly managed to have Whittaker out of that fight. And for the life of me, I don't know what kept Whittaker conscious in that fight. It was unbelievable. You know, if that's 99% of any other fighter against Romero, they're going to sleep, man. So, like, he's the total package. You know, he's scary. He puts the fear in fighters. He's a great striker, powerful striker, explosive, and he's got that credentialed wrestling background, explosive with that too. However, on the opposite side of the cage is going to be Paulo Costa, who is a totally different fighter than any fighter that Yoel Romero's ever faced before. You know, I know he's fought good fighters like Robert Whittaker twice. He's fought Luke Rockhold, even though I believe Anana's probably got a better chin than Luke Rockhold. He's fought Chris Weidman, he's fought Jacare, Prime Machida, Kennedy. You know, he's fought some really, really great fighters, but he's never fought anybody like Costa. So Costa, I don't believe, is going to be intimidated by Yoel. I don't think he's going to back off from him like some fighters would, unless he gets caught and clipped, and then I think he might start, you know, thinking of plan B inside the cage. But at least early on, Costa's 28, he's in his prime right now. He's not going to be worried. He's going to come forward. He's going to be confident that he can get Romero out there, and he should be confident he can get anybody out of there, because the power that the dude possesses is also crazy. But it's his combinations that I really like. You know, he ripped to the body with the hooks as well as the head, a little bit Lineker-esque in a way. You know, yeah. He'll make it really confusing. You saw that in the Uriah Hall fight as well. At some points in the combinations, Uriah Hall just completely lost track of the momentum and what was happening and where the next punch was going to land. Was it going to be body? Was it going to be head? And he got caught quite a few times to the body and head when he was trying to block the opposite way. So Paulo Costa causes that confusion in the firefight, and this is a dangerous weapon. It's a dangerous weapon for him to use on Yoel Romero, and that I don't mean dangerous for Costa, I mean dangerous for Romero. But the other thing as well that I like about Costa is, because this is going to be a southpaw and orthodox fight again, he uses kicks really well, and I think he can start slamming kicks into the body of Romero. Romero's got to have an answer for the body shots, and he's got to have an answer for any potential combinations that come, especially when Costa starts changing levels with the shots. So Romero's got to have a game plan. He's got to have an answer. But I think he does have that answer, and I think the answer will be the wrestling, because, like you've already mentioned, we saw Costa taken down with a blast double from Uriah Hall. We saw him taken down a couple of times by Bambose, and those two are strikers. They're not even like. They've not even got any sort of wrestling background. I don't think so, especially not on the Olympic level. So if those two strikers are taking down Costa, I know they didn't keep him down, and I genuinely don't think Romero can keep Costa down for too long either. But the fact that those two took him down, I think Romero's going to be looking at that and just thinking, fuck, well, if those did it, then I'm definitely going to be able to do it. And I think it's possible. I do think that Costa will keep getting up, but that's going to rain a little bit on his cardio. And against Uriah Hall, we saw towards the end of that fight, Costa was a little bit tired. It wasn't a massively crazy, fast-paced fight. You know, I know Costa came forward with shots in bunches and stuff like that, but it wasn't a ridiculously paced fight. Not like your Whittaker-Romero fight sort of halfway through, which was a crazy pace. So the fact that he's tiring on sort of his average output towards the end of round one, I think is a little bit worrying from Costa's perspective. So if Yoel can get in there and wrestle, or even just tie up with Costa, take away that path to victory, take away that power, just tie up with him and just grind it out a little bit on the cage. If this is even possible to do, like I say, we don't know what we're going to see. One fight has got to come. Only one fighter can come forward, basically. So if Romero starts grinding early, that could drain the gas tank of Costa, and he could take over late in the fight, which I do believe is probably has the most likelihood of happening. But man, like, you can't count out Costa in this fight. I know his path to victory is a puncher's stance, but it's such an enhanced puncher's chance just because he not only hits hard as fuck, but like I said, the combinations that he puts together are really good as well. So it's gonna be interesting. I personally just think that from Paulo Costa's point of view in the UFC, he's coming off wins against Gareth McClellan, Olawale Bambose, Johnny Hendricks, a declined Johnny Hendricks, totally declined Johnny Hendricks, and Uriah Hall. And those guys just aren't Yoel Romero. Now, you can only beat what's put in front of you, and any fighter that makes his way to the top of the division and becomes a superstar, potential champion, they all go through this phase where they make that big jump from one fight to the next, and they look great in there. They look like they needed the jump and they flourished. That could be a case for Costa in this fight, but Yoel Romero has been at the top for so long now. He's fought the best of the best. He's been in wars, which I don't think are wars that are going to damage him. We talk about damage. People break their hands when they hit Yoel Romero's face. And honestly, I just think that if Romero uses his wrestling, which I believe he should do, then this could be a potentially comfortable victory for him. But if he doesn't use his wrestling, or is a little bit hesitant, and you know he's surprised by what Costa's bringing forward and the combinations that he's throwing, then I think in a striking battle, we'll either see Romero knocked out or he'll lose a decision. So Romero has to wrestle. I think that he will wrestle personally. So for that reason, I am going to take Yoel Romero to win. And if he does wrestle, I think it'll come down to cardio sort of later in the fight. And I think Romero's cardio will hold that a little bit better than what Costa's will. And I agree with you, John. He's got 7 third-round knockouts, which is crazy. He's the third-round king. And I think we could potentially see another late knockout here. So he's got to use his wrestling. He has to. If he doesn't, he's going to lose the fight. But I think he does. I'm taking Yoel Romero to win. I'm going to take him to win via knockout. And in the next fight on the Newsome MMA main card, we've got Derek Brunson versus Ian Heinisch. John, who have you got?
Yeah, again, this will be an interesting fight. Obviously, Derek Brunson, 35 years old now. I think he's a guy that we're also starting to see on the start of a decline. Obviously, he lost his previous 2 fights to the Elias Theodorou fight, which he won back in May. Lost to Israel Adesanya in the first round. I mean, that was a very strange fight when you watch it back. I mean, he did not want any of Adesanya's stand-up game at all, and Adesanya just toyed with him. Derek Brunson was just diving for the takedown straight away, not setting anything up, and literally just desperate to get the fight to the ground. Adesanya had no trouble shrugging him off and eventually finishing him. And then obviously the fight prior to that was the Jacare Souza fight, where Jacare put him away with the head kick and follow-up strikes in the first round. And yeah, he got back to winning ways against Lars Theodorou. Obviously, Theodoro's his style has got its critics, and many people have their say on how he fights. So I don't really know how much you can take from that. I mean, Derek Brunson, we know what we're going to get with Derek Brunson. He's got power in that left hand, and he's a very good wrestler. And when he can catch you with that left hand, he can do damage. We've seen that. We saw that in the Dan Kelly fight. We saw that in the Lyoto Machida fight, where he absolutely silenced the crowd there in Sao Paulo. And when he caught Lyoto Machida coming in, we saw it in the Uriah Hall fight. I mean, there's so many of these fights that. Especially first round finishes, Ed Herman, Sam Alvey, Rowan Carnero. I mean, all these fights first round finishes, and that is when he is the most dangerous. When he's got all his power, when he's loading up that left hand, and he kind of hits you with it out of the blue, and you don't see it coming. Now, Ian Heinisch is a guy that I'm still a bit unsure about. I mean, obviously, he's 2-0 in the UFC so far. Obviously, if we include his Dana White Contender Series fight, he's 3-0. He's fought two guys with very good backgrounds in jiu-jitsu, in Cesar Ferreira and Antonio Carlos Jr. Obviously, he's won both those via decision. Heinisch is that kind of guy that gets the job done. I mean, in both those fights against Ferreira and Antonio Carlos Jr., I think he was taken down a total of 9 times in those two fights. And usually when guys are taken down 9 times over the course of 2 fights, when you're taken down 5 times in one fight, you're taken down 4 times in another fight. Quite often you see them on the wrong end of the decision, but he's managed to win both those fights via decision, and that's because he's very good at getting back to his feet. I mean, he's a very good offensive wrestler himself. His defensive wrestling is where there is a slight issue, but he can get back to his feet well, and he works when they're on the feet and they're standing, and he obviously does enough, and he makes sure that he's always in your face and doing enough to rack up those points. Even if he does get taken down a couple of times in a round, he'll make sure he gets back to his feet. He makes sure then he gets back up, pressures you, and tries to land shots. Now, my worry for Heinisch in this fight is obviously, like I mentioned, Derek Brunson is a very good wrestler, and he does have the ability to take his opponents down, and we've seen that over the course of his fights. Now, Ian Heinisch has been taken down 9 times in the last 2 fights. If Derek Brunson can take Heinisch down and keep him down, then it's going to be a very long few rounds for Ian Heinisch. But if we see more of the same of what we've seen in Heinisch's previous fights, where maybe Derek Brunson gets a takedown, but he can only hold it there for 20-30 seconds, and then Heinisch works back to his feet, and something that Heinisch is very good at as well, which we saw a couple of times in the Shoeface fight, is he's actually reversing the position in the scramble and coming out on top, and we saw that a couple of times, as I said, in his last fight, where and we saw it in the Cesar Ferreira fight as well, where he'll get taken down, he'll spend 20 seconds on the bottom, 30 seconds on the bottom, and then he'll start thinking, right, now I need to get this fight back to standing. He'll go for the scramble, and during the scramble he actually manages to transition and end up in top control, and obviously that's a good way that he manages to steal rounds off people, because he starts the rounds well on the feet, then he'll get taken down, and then maybe with a minute or so, minute and a half left in the round, he then reverses the position, and then he's the guy on top at the end. So he's the first impression and the last impression on that the judges have, obviously, when they're picking their winner for each round. So it's going to be interesting to see whether Brunson can hold Heinisch down, because I think that's how he wins this fight. I don't think, although he's got power, I don't know if he does stop Heinisch. Heinisch is a tough guy. He's never been finished via strikes in his career. As I say, Derek Brunson, I do think he's waning a little bit. I think the power's going a bit. His last knockout win was that Machida win in 2017. So yeah, it is really going to be interesting to see whether he's got the power to knock Heinisch out first of all, or whether he's got the top control to be able to keep him on the mat. If two very decorated grapplers, especially Cesar Ferreira, if he can't keep Heinisch down and he took him down 5 times, I don't think that Derek Brunson's going to be able to do it. I think that Derek Brunson may land 2 or 3 takedowns over the course of 3 rounds, but I don't think he's going to have any significant top time. I don't think he's going to have any significant land any significant ground and pound while it's there. And I think Heinisch is going to get up, and I think he's going to work, and I think he's going to utilise his boxing and his striking and his pressure most of all to get to Derek Brunson, and yeah, I think that is going to win him a fight. And I think this fight's going to play out very similarly to his last 2 fights as well. I think taken down, get back up, pressure your opponent, outstrike him on the feet, and just look the better of the two in the judges' eyes. So I'm going with Ian Heinisch to win this fight, and I think he's going to win via decision.
Yeah, man, it's a really good fight, and I'm sort of with you. I don't really know what to make of Heinisch at this point. I just feel he's one of those fighters that is a great fighter from an all round perspective, but he doesn't really shine in any area. And being tough, durable, and gritty with a ton of heart is what I think are his biggest attributes in mixed martial arts, and that will take. You've got to have that if you're going to go to the top of this sport. But I do feel that when those are your biggest strengths, it will only take you so far. Now, when you look at Derek Brunson, his losses: Israel Adesanya, Jacare, Anderson Silva, Robert Whittaker. The Silva fight he won for a start, so I don't really see that as a loss. But Yoel Romero also on that list, and I just feel that he only loses to the best guys in the world at middleweight, and I just don't think Ian Heinisch is on the level right now. I'm not saying he can't get there, but right now he's not on the level of Adesanya, he's not on the level of Jacare or Robert Whittaker or Yoel Romero, and I think this fight is going to be a lot closer than what some people think. I do think the fight is going to end because I think either Brunson starches Heinisch early when he's fresh and he's got, his powers at his strongest. But if the fight goes on late, I do feel that the grit, the cardio, and the heart of Heinisch will start shining through. And, when you look at Brunson's losses, he's lost 7 fights and 5 of them have come by knockout. That's a big percentage of knockout losses. So can you, do you call him chinny? I think it's probably fair to say that he's not got the strongest chin. So if it goes late, I can see Heinisch finishing him. I just like Brunson in this fight, though. I think the move over to Henry Hoof at Hard Knocks 365 was a great decision for him to make. There's so many good guys in that gym. There's, you've got world champions, you've got big physical guys that you can, train with daily. And also Henry Hoof himself is an absolute master of a striking coach, a credentialed decorated striker himself when he was competing. So to be able to work with someone like Henry Hoof and tighten that striking defense up, which is, in my opinion, what Derek Brunson's biggest hole was in his game, is only going to improve his game. And, I know Brunson's 35 now and he's not in his prime. He's still capable. And whilst he's under Henry Hoof, he's still going to be developing a little bit. He's still going to be improving and he's still going to be honing his game. So I don't think you can really look at the age and the fact that he's out his prime and write him off. But even when it comes down to the wrestling, I think both guys are going to be a little bit nullified in this perspective because Brunson, I think, can take Heinisch down, but Heinisch has got some really underrated Brazilian jiu-jitsu. His jiu-jitsu is actually really, really good, and props to him against Antonio Carlos Jr. because I said in that breakdown, I think it was going to be a pretty straightforward win for Carlos Jr. And in that first round, it looked like it was going to be that way. Heinisch got taken down and he was getting controlled on the mat. But the fact that he managed to hang in there with Carlos Jr., stand up from Carlos Jr., take him deep, and then start defending takedowns and starting to come forward and implement your own game, that absolutely speaks volumes to me, because Antonio Carlos Jr. is a nightmare for fighters in this middleweight division. An absolute nightmare. Not many people stand back up without being submitted from him. Not many people can take him into deep water. Not many people can even hang with him on the feet. Carlos Jr.'s striking's improved over the last few years. So for Heinisch to be able to beat him in a decision where he's been put in some horrific places on the mat throughout the 3 rounds, absolutely props to Heinisch. And I don't think, after watching Heinisch fight that way against Carlos Jr., I don't think anybody's going to have the way with Heinisch on the mat, even when he's on his back. I just think his jiu-jitsu's that underrated. It's that good. Now, with Brunson's got a different type of takedown game to what Antonio Carlos Jr. had. So Antonio Carlos Jr. was looking for the body locks, the trips, trying to drag him down physically. But Brunson's got that wrestling background. He's going to be able to level change. He's going to be able to shoot in on takedowns if he wants to, and he can complete takedowns. His completion rate's good, and I think he will complete a couple of takedowns in this fight. But I don't expect the fight to stay on the mat for too long. I definitely think Heinisch's jiu-jitsu is way better than the top pressure game of Brunson. And on the flip side, can Heinisch take Brunson down? It's a possibility, but Derek Brunson's still got 100% takedown defense in the UFC at least. So that's a tall task to be the first one to take Brunson down, especially after some of the beasts he's fought in the wrestling department. I think the fight's going to be won and lost on the feet, and like I say, it's whether it ends early or whether it ends late. I do think it's going to end at some point. But I just think with the fact that Brunson only loses to the top of the division, and his striking is actually, it is quite tidy offensively. Defensively, there's still a few questions, but I do expect Henry Hoof and Hard Knocks to really tighten that up. But his striking is actually really good, and the fact that he didn't look that great against Elias, I'm telling you, man, that was just because of the way Elias was fighting, just weird, throwing stupid kicks, and it was poor. Honestly, at the level of the UFC, it was very poor to see. And even Elias, the man that he is, he admitted that afterwards on social media, and he knows the performance wasn't great. But I think the fact that his striking was that bad, I just really think it completely threw Brunson off, and he didn't know what to do. To deal with something that bad at this level is almost a hindrance for him. So I think Brunson is got the more experience. I think he only loses to the best of the best. I don't think Ian Heinisch is there yet. I do think the fight ends, so I'm going Derek Brunson to win. I think he's going to win via knockout. And in the final fight on the Newsome MMA main card, we've got Raphael Assuncao against Corey Sandhagen. John, who have you got?
I've said this time and time again tonight, and this is another fight that I'm really looking forward to seeing. I think it's such a fun, stylistic matchup. I think both guys are really fun guys to watch as well. Raphael Assuncao, for me, is one of those guys that will go down on the list of the best fighters to not win a belt. I mean, he's had a fantastic career. He's 37 years old now. He's fought the best of the best in his weight class, and yeah, unfortunately, he has no belt to show for it. He always seems to fall short, just as he's coming up to those title eliminators. And yeah, when you look over the last 5 years, his only losses have come against Marlon Moraes in his last fight, and then TJ Dillashaw back in 2016, who obviously was the champion for some time. And yeah, Assuncao, I really liked his evolution over the years as well, because he's got a fantastic jiu-jitsu base style. His jiu-jitsu is super dangerous, but he's also a very good striker now. He's a very clean striker, he's very crisp striker, and he's very technical with his striking. He mixes in punches and kicks nicely. He'll throw the occasional bit of a crazy technique in there as well, just to mix things up. And yeah, I really like Assuncao, but 37 years old at bantamweight, this is when it starts to concern me that you're starting to be on the decline. And I know that's kind of harsh to say after just coming on the back of one loss against Marlon Moraes, who's another top guy in the division, and but he got rocked. He got rocked badly in that fight before he obviously got submitted in the first round by the choke, and he's going up against a guy who's young, hungry. He's really exciting guy to watch as well, Sandhagen. I mean, he's one of these guys that every time you watch him, you kind of want to see more of him because he's got such, I don't want to say a strange technique, but it's so fluid but unorthodox. It's kind of like that Dominic Cruz style. I mean, he's constantly cutting angles. His footwork is constantly switching stances. He'll be throwing your normal combinations, jabs, things like that, and then he'll throw in something crazy like a jumping knee and like cartwheel kicks and all sorts of crazy things. And yeah, I do really like it. I really like the way that he rips it to the body as well with his shots. I like the way he mixes in leg kicks. He mixes in those low leg kicks as well, the calf. And he's just a dangerous guy everywhere. We saw that in his fights against Bautista, where he beat him via armbar in the first round. Alcantara, he overcame some adversity to come out as the winner in that fight. I mean, he showed his rubber arms in that fight. Austin Arnett, he looked great in that in his very first fight in the UFC, and then he overcame a tough John Lineker in his last fight. John Lineker, who you know what you're going to get with him, he's going to march forward and swing bombs and throw 5 or 6 hooks in a row until he lands one on you, and he came through that one unscathed as well. And I actually think we're going to see Corey Sandhagen win this fight, and I think it's going to be his movement that does it. I mean, my only concern is if Assuncao gets his fight to the mat early in one of the rounds, and he's got a lot of time to work. But again, like I say, we saw how hard Sandhagen is to submit, and how he can get out of those dangerous positions if he's in there. But I wouldn't fancy my chances against Assuncao. I wouldn't like to put myself in those positions, but I think he'll be able to utilise his movement and his speed and that variety of striking to just frustrate Assuncao. I think he'll be able to be elusive. I think he'll be able to outstrike. I think he'll be able to really mix up the angles to be able to, because he's tall and long as well, so he can hit you when from the outside or cutting those weird angles or switching the stance when you can't get to him, when you can't reach him, when you're just on the outside, you're just an inch or two short of his range. And I mean 5'11" going up against 5'6", and there's a significant reach advantage as well. Sandhagen, not only with the arm but the legs as well, and he's used that front kick to maintain distance. I just think it's going to be really hard for Assuncao to be able to strike with him. Now that's why I think Assuncao needs to turn to his ground game. Maybe he can get a takedown off a kick. But if Sandhagen moves like he's shown in the UFC so far, and he's continuing to improve as well, I think he'll be able to be elusive enough to avoid your typical takedowns. And yeah, I think it's going to be a frustrating night for Assuncao. And like I say, I'm a massive Assuncao fan, but I really do think that Sandhagen is just going to sneak this. I think it's going to be a very close fight again. I think it's going to be a similar fight to the Lineker fight in the fact that it could go to a split decision. I think judges could see it differently between the two fighters, especially if Assuncao does manage to get Sandhagen down a couple of times. But yeah, I think we're going to see the charge of Corey Sandhagen continue. I think he's going to be able to use that striking to rack up the points and get a very, very close decision victory. So I'm going for the winner to be Corey Sandhagen via decision.
Man, I absolutely agree with you with what you said with Assuncao potentially going down as the best fighter in MMA to ever walk the planet without winning a title at the top level. Because let's just talk about his CV. You know, Jorge Masvidal, yes, you've heard that right, he fought Jorge Masvidal back in 2005. Joe Lawson, Uriah Faber, Johnny Eduardo, TJ Dillashaw twice, once he beat him, Pedro Munoz, Brian Caraway, Aljamain Sterling, Marlon Moraes twice, beating him once, Rob Font. You know, the dude has fought so many good guys in his career, and you know, his losses have come to Marlon Moraes, TJ Dillashaw as of late. You know, there's a couple earlier on in his career. You know, he was a different fighter back then, but man, again, like I've just said with Brunson, especially in the last 5 years, you know, Assuncao only really loses to the best guys, and he's been competing with the best consistently for so many years. So yeah, I totally agree with that statement. And Assuncao is a very tricky customer, but listen, so's Corey Sandhagen. He's, like you've already mentioned, Johnny. He's got a huge height advantage, reach advantage with both his arms and his legs, and not only that, Sandhagen's just really, really unorthodox and elusive at the same time. He's just really tricky to deal with, and actually, how he handled John Lineker in that fight was fucking nuts. By the way, if you've not seen that fight, you know, if you've been living under a rock or whatever, go and fire Fight Pass up and watch that fight, because it's an unbelievable fight. But how he handled Lineker's forward pressure and the combinations that Lineker throws and the durability and what Lineker can walk through in order to land his own shots really speaks volumes. And it was a very, very close decision. It ended up being a split decision. I really wasn't sure when it went to the judges which way they were going to score it. I did think, you know, if I had to choose a winner from that fight after watching it, I would have edged it to Sandhagen, but if it went the other way, there'd be no complaints either. So the way Sandhagen actually coped with Lineker in a way that not many other fighters have been able to really speaks volumes as well. But Assuncao, man, is a veteran. He's a savvy veteran. You know, he knows how to win fights. He knows how to pull away on the judges' scorecards. He's got a plethora of great wins under his belt. He's got different ways to. He can adopt different styles to handle different styles, and like I say, he's just a really tough guy to beat. So credit to Marlon Moraes, because he actually hit Assuncao and then on the feet, and then finished him with a guillotine. So credit to Moraes that he managed to get a fighter like Assuncao out of there in round one. But I think Assuncao is going to have some difficulty in this fight, because just the pace and the volume that Sandhagen can put on, along with his weird angles, his unorthodox movement, his elusive style, I just think he's a puzzle to solve inside the cage, and I don't think it's a puzzle that you can really prepare for in your camp, because you've got to get someone to emulate Corey Sandhagen, and I just don't think anyone can successfully emulate Sandhagen. I just think he's a one of a kind type of fighter, and he's just. I think some of the stuff that Sandhagen does inside the cage, you know, he doesn't really plan for it. He just lets it, like you said, John, the word flow. He just lets himself flow. So it's not something that he can really prepare for exactly. So it's a puzzle that you've got to solve inside the cage, and by doing that, you're probably gonna drop the first round just by trying to get your reads in and figure him out. But then if you don't really get those reads and you can't figure him out, or if your style's not there to beat him, then he's going to pull away on the scorecards round two, maybe round three. And I think if anybody can do it right now, it's Assuncao, because like I say, he's a savvy veteran, and you cannot count out experience in this game. Experience, it means so much, because you've been in there against so many different styles, the best of the best, and for such a long period of time consistently. So if anybody can figure Sandhagen out from a fight IQ perspective and adaptations inside the cage to make you reads, I think it's Assuncao, but I just feel that he's going to have difficulty with Sandhagen. I feel a lot of fighters are going to have difficulty with Sandhagen just because of the way he fights. I think the fight's going to go to the scorecard. So when it goes to the scorecard, you're looking at who's been the aggressor. You're looking at who's landed more shots, more volume, who's putting it together better, who's flourishing in the fight. And I just feel that those are the advantages that Sandhagen brings with his style. Like I say, specifically volume. His volume's so high. Assuncao's got to find a way to deal with that early and make sure he's not being landed on as much. And like I say, would I be surprised if Assuncao did go out there and he did make these reads and he did adjust and he did figure Sandhagen out? I wouldn't be surprised. Like I say, I think if anybody can in the division, he's probably maybe sort of in the bracket of 2 or 3 fighters that could. But I do think Sandhagen I think his volume, his pace, his pressure is going to look better in the judges' eyes should it go to the scorecards, which, as I've already said, I think it does. So for that reason, I'm going to take Corey Sandhagen to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And with the Newsome MMA main card complete, we'll now quick fire off the remaining Newsome MMA prelims. And first up is Gabriel Benitez versus Sodiq Yusuff. John, who have you got?
Yeah, again, another fun fight on the prelims that I'm looking forward to, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Sodiq Yusuff back in action. I mean, he's a dangerous guy. He's a really interesting fighter to watch. Obviously, we saw him in that last fight against Shayman Moraes. He looked really good, looked very quick, picked his shots at the right times, utilised that low calf kick beautifully, showed his power, especially late in the fight, knocking Moraes down and nearly finishing it. Obviously, it did go to a decision in the end, which he did win. But yeah, he's a guy that I think can go quite a long way in the featherweight division, and he's a good fighter and one to definitely keep an eye out for. And he's going up against a guy in Gabriel Benitez, who he's coming into the fight off the back of back-to-back wins over Jason Knight, and then obviously that last win against Humberto Bandenay back in May of last year. I mean, already over 12 months since he's last competed, and again in that fight he showed his power. After the first 20 seconds he knocked down Bandenay, and then Bandenay tried to lock up an arm, and he got slammed on his head and finished. And it's going to be a really fun fight between two guys who do possess power, but for me, Sodiq Yusuff is going to win this fight. I think he's going to be too quick for Benitez. I think he is going to utilise that calf kick. I do like his straight shots. I think he's got a good jab. I think he's when he picks his moments to strike, he attacks quickly. He gets in and out really nicely. I think Benitez is going to have a hard time connecting with him. So I'm going with Sodiq Yusuff to win this fight, and I think he wins by decision.
Yeah, man, I love Sodiq Yusuff. He's definitely one of the prospects that I rate highly in the UFC. Is a potential top 5 fighter, potential top 3 fighter. Fuck, man, he's a potential champion. He's 9-1. You know, he's still young. At 26 years old, so he's not even entering his prime, but the dude's got fucking everything. He's striking, he mixes in the vicious low kicks in his combinations, and just everything he throws is just quick, accurate, hard. I'm telling you, man, he's going to be a problem for a lot of fighters. Listen, you don't go in as a 26-year-old, 9-1 into the UFC, and beat Shayman Moraes, nearly finish him as well in that 3rd round. If you're not at that level already, you know, he's so good. But, you know, on the other side, you've got Gabriel Benitez, who is also another quick, accurate, sharp fighter. 21-6, great record, a lot of experience. It's going to be a really fun fight, but I just think that going into this fight, I think Benitez is going to be happy to trade. Sodiq's going to be happy to take shots, to give shots. His shots will hurt more than what Benitez's will hurt him. Like I say, the low kicks could be a good weapon to use in this fight. Barzola used it against Benitez when they fought, and, you know, not overly, but, you know, it did take Benitez off his game a little bit. I can't look past Sodiq Yusuff in this fight. I think he's going to land harder shots. I think his combinations are going to really start messing up Gabriel Benitez, and I think he's going to knock him out. So I'm going to take Sodiq Yusuff to win. I'm going to take him to win by knockout. And in the next fight, we've got Devonte Smith. Now, Devonte Smith has had a couple of opponents, and the latest one actually just got announced today. He's fighting the newcomer, Kama Worthy. I hope I haven't butchered that name. But, John, who have you got?
Yeah, I mean, that changing opponent came so late today. I haven't really had much chance to look at Kama Worthy at all, but obviously I think people are starting to know about Devonte Smith. He's a guy who's come through Dana White's Contender Series, obviously won in the 1st round of that fight against Joseph Lowry, and then he fought Julian Erosa. Put him away nice in the 1st round brutally, and then Dong Hyun Ma, which he back at UFC 234 in February, and he also put him away in the 1st round. And very similar to Sodiq Yusuff, actually, this is a guy who I think can go a long way. I mean, he's so quick. He throws his jab really well. He gets in and out really quickly. I mean, he's got a beautiful 1-2 combination as well, and I do feel fair play to Cormier for stepping up, but I do feel like he's going into a bit of a lion's den. I mean, he's coming into the fight off the back of a 5-fight win streak. 3 of those wins have come via stoppage. All of them quite late stoppages as well, 2 in round 3 and then the rear naked choke win in round 2. But he has fought some UFC caliber competition before. Kyle Nelson, he fought back in 2017. He lost via knockout in the first round. Matt Bessetta as well, who's well known amongst MMA faithful. He fought him back in 2015, lost again via strikes in round 2. If you go a long way back, he fought Paul Felder as well back in 2012. But like I say, that is going a long way back. But for me, 32 years old, when you look at it, the competitions he's been fighting on, they're all very local promotions, none of the usual feeder promotions that we talk about, and we know that the level of competition he's going up against. You look at some of the guys' records he goes up against. I mean, he's not going up against bad guys, 18-12, 7-3, 6-3, 11-7. I mean, none of them are particularly terrible records of his opponents, but I just don't think he's going to have faced anyone at the level of Devonte Smith recently. And I think this is one of those fights just to keep Devonte Smith on the card, and I think it's going to be a fight that makes him look good again. I think he's going to get it done in the first round. I do really like his striking. I think his speed is going to be too much for a lot of people in that weight class, and I think he gets the business done. I think he knocks out Cormier in the first round.
Yeah, props to Worthy, man, like you've already mentioned, but definitely, it's very simple why Worthy's done this. So he's coming in on short notice, less than a week's notice, to fight a killer like Devonte Smith, but he's going to get paid by the UFC, so that's plus number one. Yep. Then he's also jumping on a huge card, like I've already mentioned at the start of the podcast, in my opinion, the best card of the year so far. And then I say it time and time again, and I'm still waiting for someone to give me a name that this hasn't happened to. But when fighters come in on short notice and do the UFC a favour, they always get another fight. So for Worthy to come in, even if he's going to get finished in round 1, which I think he is going to, he's going to get another fight. This is his entry in the UFC. Come in, do the UFC a favour, get knocked out, you'll get another fight. That's as simple as it is. And that's what's going to happen, man. He's been getting finished in round 1 by the likes of Kyle Nelson, Anthony Retich, and you're coming in there against a killer in Devonte Smith as well. So I think Devonte Smith is way more dangerous than any of the strikers that he's been knocked out by before. He's got 6 losses, 5 have come by knockout, so he is susceptible to getting knocked out. I think that's exactly what happens in this fight. A week's notice is very, very tough to come into UFC on a card like this to face a killer like Devonte Smith. I think deep down with his sort of knowing what's about to happen, but like I say, he's doing the UFC a solid and he'll get rewarded after. I think Devonte Smith's going to knock him out in round 1. And in the next fight, we've got another really fun fight. We've got Manny Bermudez versus Kenney. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I really like Manny Bermudez. I'm a massive fan of him. I mean, he's known as the Bermuda Triangle for a reason, because he that triangle choke of his is extremely dangerous. Probably one of the most dangerous actually in mixed martial arts at the moment that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, the triangle choke is one of those chokes that you tend to not see as frequently anymore as you used to back in the day with in the early days of mixed martial arts, and I think that's because it's one of those first submissions that you learn when you go to any kind of jiu-jitsu or submission grappling clubs or anything like that, but it's also one of the first that you learn how to escape, and when you get to the very top level, a lot of the guys know how to escape or know how to ride out a triangle choke. So to see someone who does it so often, it's they must be extremely specialist in that submission. But if he doesn't get you by the triangle, he's going to get you by some other kind of choke. He should just be called the choker, because that's what he does. He chokes people out. He grabs a neck no matter how, and he squeezes it until you tap out. And he's going up against the guy Kenney. Obviously, we've seen him once in the UFC before. Made his debut against Ray Borg in March. Felt really bad for Ray Borg in that fight, because Ray Borg definitely won, in my opinion. We did see in that fight from Kenney, we saw he's got some decent wrestling. He managed to take Ray Borg down a couple of times, and we also saw that he's got couple of good scrambles and transitions on the ground as well. Now, I think this kind of plays into Manny Bermudez's hands. I mean, Bermudez, he's tall for the weight class. He's 5'10". He's got a long reach. So obviously striking, he's always going to have that reach advantage. And if Kenney's going to want to try and wrestle and going to try and scramble like the Ray Borg fight, obviously I know that Ray Borg was coming out there wrestling himself because that's predominantly his style. And maybe Bermudez won't come out as wrestle heavy as Ray Borg did, but he'll still want to wrestle. He'll still want to get this fight to the mat. And like I say, there were so many scrambles and so many transitions. I just can't see past Manny Bermudez at some point catching Casey Kenney's neck in one of those scrambles or one of those takedown attempts or anything like that. I just at the moment I can't see how Bermudez doesn't do it. I mean, and even if he doesn't do it like your typical way or your traditional way. I mean, he finds a way to. He'll beat you up with strikes first if he needs to, and knock you down, and then and then reverse it and get you into a triangle choke, similar to the Davy Grant fight and things like that. I mean, he's just an all-round dangerous guy who just likes to finish fights via choke wherever he can. So. I'm all in on the Manny Bermudez camp at the moment. I really like watching this guy. I think he's really fun to watch. He's on a 20-fight win streak. He's going back to I think his amateur days as well. He's 14-0 as a professional. His last fight was the battle of the undefeated against Benito Lopez, and he came out of that with flying colours, first round guillotine choke. And yeah, I just think that Kenney's going to get caught in one of the scrambles, one of the transitions, and Bermudez going to snatch his neck and get another choke win on his record. So I'm going with Manny Bermudez to win this fight via submission. I think he's going to get it done in the first round as well.
Yeah, Manny Bermudez's nickname is actually a little bit deceptive. You know, the Bermudez Triangle, and not deceptive in the fact that he has a fantastic triangle. You know, that there's no secret there. He locks it up quick, and he knows exactly what he's doing in those positions. But what I mean by deceptive is I think his neck catches are unbelievably like you just don't see it from. I've never seen a neck snatch so quick from any other fighter in mixed martial arts, and it's almost one of them things. Like I give you an example. So when I was watching tape on this fight, I was eating a packet of crisps, right, and Bermudez is grappling with his opponent, and I've looked down into my packet of crisps and I've seen a nice crisp, so I've gone for that crisp, and then by the time I pulled the crisp out and ate it, I've looked up, the dude's fucking choking somebody out, and I was like, holy fuck! It literally took me about 3 or 4 seconds to get this crisp, and they weren't even in like a grappling scenario when I went down for this good crisp, man. So like I say, that they're so fast, it's unbelievable. But on the opposite side, Casey Kenney, man, is impressive. Like, who can say that they've come in on the UFC debut on short notice to fight Ray Borg and beat him? Now, I think that Kenney actually lost that fight, but the bottom line is his record says otherwise. And he took the fight to Ray Borg, and he hung in there with one of the world's best fighters, and that's what Ray Borg is. He is such a solid fighter, and I think Casey Kenney is the much better striker in this fight. I think that if he can keep this fight on the feet, if he can sprawl, if he can disengage at all costs, and really make Bermudez work on the feet, I think Casey Kenney's going to completely outpoint him. I think he's going to light him up. I just think he's striking. He mixes kicks in really well. I think he'll really give it to Bermudez, and it wouldn't surprise me if he even finished Bermudez on the feet. But this is if the fight stays standing. Now, Casey Kenney's got a wrestling background, and we saw that in the Borg fight. He wasn't winning towards the end of the fight. He wasn't winning the scrambles, and he wasn't winning. He wasn't being able to defend the takedowns, and he was losing clinch positions and stuff like that. But he just kept falling back to his wrestling. When he was in space, he kept on tying up, and it just seems like his wrestling background means that when he goes into autopilot, that's where he falls back to. And unfortunately, that does play into Bermudez's game. And if he starts trying to take Bermudez down, that's going to be a nightmare, because even if Bermudez is on the bottom, he's going to find a way back to guard. He's going to be throwing triangles up. He's going to be trying to sweep. You're trying to reverse. You're trying to snatch a neck without you even knowing, because they're not telegraphed. And I think that in that position, Bermudez will win, and I think he'll win by submission. like I say, it all depends on Casey Kenney. Does he stay disciplined? Does he disengage, sprawl, and strike with Bermudez? If he does, he wins. But I think he falls back to his wrestling. I think he leans on his bread and butter, where he goes into autopilot, as I've already mentioned. And for that reason, I think Bermudez is going to find something in a scramble. So I've got Manny Bermudez to win. I've got him to win via submission. And in the next fight, we've got Drakkar Klose versus Christos Iagos. John, who have you got?
Again, this is a fun fight, and this is a really close fight. I mean, Giagos is he's a bit of an underdog in this fight, but but I like him since we've seen him back in the UFC. Obviously, he lost that first fight back against Charles Oliveira, which he had a very good first round, but got choked out in the second, and then he's won 2 decisions against Hirota and Hadzovic, mainly utilising his wrestling, and it's going to be interesting to see how he fares in this fight. I mean, Drakkar Klose is a good fighter. He's got decent wrestling himself. But my worry is that when he got taken down by Bobby Green, Bobby Green is a good wrestler in his own right as well, he did get held on the mat for a long time. So if Giagos can get closer down a couple of times in a couple of rounds and spend some time on top, then he could come out victorious. But if the fight just stays standing, I don't really know. I think it's quite an even matchup. I think Klose probably does edge it, and he probably does take the slight striking edge. I mean, he's got wins over good strikers in Diaz and Venata, so you'd like to think that Klose would be able to overcome a guy like Giagos as well, but it is going to be a tough fight. And I mean, like I say, if Giagos can get some top time and he can spend some time on top of Klose, this could be quite a tight fight and quite a close fight. And I do see it as one that's going to go to a decision, and it could just be one of those that throw up a bit of a strange result, but. I think I'm going to have to go with Drakkar Klose to on my pick. I think that I do think he's just a better all-round fighter. I think standing, I think he'll have the slight advantage. I think Giagos may find it hard to take him down. I mentioned that Giagos has had success in his last 2 fights, but they're against, no offense to Hadzovic and Hirota. I mean, they're against guys who haven't got the same kind of takedown defense as Klose, and so therefore I think Giagos will find it a lot harder to have the top control that he needs and he wants to be able to win this fight comfortably. So I think it's going to be, like I said, I think it's going to be quite evenly matched, but I do think that Drakkar Klose is going to edge it slightly with his striking and therefore take a decision.
Yeah, man, Giagos is a fighter that I feel that I know and understand his game very, very well. I've cashed on him the last 2 fights that he's fought, especially last time out against Damir Hadzovic. He was something crazy like a plus 190 underdog or something like that. So I tend to have really good reads on his fights. Now, the one thing that I bought into in between the Hirota and the Hadzovic fight was his cardio, and this is where I think he's actually going to lose this fight, because he spoke about the Hirota fight that he had an adrenaline rush, and he tried to get the finish, and ultimately it cost him, but it won't happen again. And actually, towards the end of that Damir Hadzovic fight, he was very tired again. Hadzovic had taken him down and was controlling him on top in that 3rd round. I was actually in the arena for that fight in Stockholm, so it was nice to get a good view of exactly what was happening. And like I say, he's very concerning towards the end of the fight. So I've come up with a theory now with Giagos. I think Giagos is his body is just really filling out, and you see this happening to a few fighters that end up going into a weight class above the fine while they're a little bit younger, while the body's a little bit smaller. But naturally, as they're progressing in the career, the bodies just start filling out a little bit. And, Giagos has already got a huge frame for the division. And I genuinely just think that Giagos is now huge for the weight class. I think he has tougher cuts than he used to when he was a little bit younger. And until he makes that move up, which I think he should, whether he does or not, we'll see. But until he makes that jump up, I think he's always going to have a difficult 3rd round, a difficult end of the 2nd round. And Drakkar Klose is not the sort of fighter that you really want to be slowing down against, because he has got the cardio to go all 3 rounds. I also like the fact that with the whole weird split from MMA Lab, Drakkar Klose has chosen to go with Eddie Char over to fight Ready, and they've got some great fighters over there, such as the Korean Zombie and Henry Cejudo. And Eddie Char is a really good coach, and all the fighters are just looking really great under him. So I expect Drakkar Klose to still be improving anyway, still be developing. But I also think that move over to fight Ready with Eddie Char is going to do him wonders as well. And I think Giagos is going to win I think he's going to win the first round, and he might come out the second round looking good. But I think Drakkar Klose is going to take over, and I think he's going to win the fight by decision. So I've got Drakkar Klose to win. I've got him to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got Hannah Cifers versus Jodie Esquibel. John, who have you got?
Yeah, two fighters that I'm not particularly high on. I mean, especially Jodie Esquibel. No offense to Jodie Esquibel, but I haven't really seen anything from her at the moment that makes me think that she can go a long way in the division. She's lost the last 3 in a row. She was 1-1 before that in Invicta before she joined the UFC as well. So I'm quite surprised that she's actually got another shot. Her overall record is 6-5 as well. I mean, yeah. She just hasn't really shown anything so far in the UFC in the 3 fights that she's competed in so far, and she's going up against Hannah Cifers, in someone who won her last fight, but again, Polyana Viana is someone that we now learning is maybe also not UFC caliber, so it's kind of hard to judge these two ladies and where they are. And one thing I did like about Hannah Cifers is the grittiness and the heart, and she's very scrappy, and we saw that in the Macy Barber fight. I mean, she did lose that fight via stoppage in the second round, but she showed toughness, she showed grit, she showed some decent control in the clinch as well, which you also saw in the Viana fight. As I say, like she's scrappy, she'll march forward, and I think that's her path to victory in this fight. I mean, Esquibel's come from primarily a boxing background, I believe, and if Hannah Cifers can get in her face and make it ugly, make it scrappy, spend some time in the clinch, grinding on the fence, and just making this an ugly fight for Esquibel, then I think she's going to come out victorious with the decision. But one thing she has to ensure is that obviously with Esquibel coming from a boxing background, she has to make sure that she moves ahead on the entries, and when she's walking her down and marching forward, she has to make sure she's keeping her head off the centre line, because otherwise she's just going to keep getting picked apart on her way in, and that does not look good on the judges' scorecards. But yeah, I think that Cifers is going to win this fight. I think it's going to be scrappy. I think it's going to be a fight that goes to the decision. But I've got Hannah Cifers to win a decision.
Yeah, man. I mean, no disrespect to Jodie Esquibel, but I don't rate her that highly even. She's on a 3-fight losing streak. Admittedly, some of those fights have been good. In regards to Kovalkiewicz, Jessica Aguilar, still never an easy out. Angela Hill, I still don't think it's an easy out for a lot of fighters. But I think 4 losses in a row, and unfortunately, I don't like to see anybody lose a job, but I think she's going to get a walking papers, and I think that's what's going to happen in this fight. I just think Hannah Cifers is better everywhere. I think her striking's more crisp. She's got heart, she's got toughness. I think she'll land the more volume. I think if anyone's going to score a takedown in this fight, it's probably going to be Cifers. I also think Cifers is stronger physically, deceptively strong as well. I feel that some fighters don't think she's going to be as tough and as strong as what she is until they're in the cage with her. So if it's not going right for Cifers on the feet, I think Cifers could potentially just tie up, push against the cage and dirty box. Like I say, I just feel that Cifers has got so many more ways to win this fight than what Jodie Esquibel has. I don't think it's going to be a total whitewash, but I do think when it gets to the judges' scorecards, well, if it gets to the judges' scorecards, I think we're going to know who's won the fight. So I'm going to take Hannah Cifers to win. I'm going to take her to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got Kyung Ho Kang versus Brandon Davis. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is an interesting fight between two guys who are very big for the weight class. I mean, these guys are fighting at 135 pounds, and Brandon Davis is 5'10". I mean, the guy's huge for the weight class, and he did look good in his last fight against the UFC newcomer Randy Costa. He looked strong for the weight class. He was good in the clinch. And one thing I do like about Davis, he's one of these fighters that will utilise all his limbs. And I do like those guys. He elbows off the break break of the clinch. He knees off the break in the clinch. He throws kicks. He throws a variety of kicks. He throws these punches. He'll throw elbows just from the outside. He'll throw those stepping elbows as well. And I do like Davis, and he's always in entertaining fights. And at 5'10" for a bantamweight, you know that pretty much he's always going to have the height and reach advantage over his opponent. And like I say, he did look like he carried his power down to the weight class as well. He didn't look like he was too drawn out or anything like that. He didn't look like all his power had been sapped from him. And Kyung-Ho Kang is again. He's not small himself. He's 5'9", so he's not a small bantamweight, but he's going to give up some height, some reach to Davis. Obviously, we saw him in his last fight against Ishihara get the first round rear naked choke. I'm not overly high on Ishihara, so I don't know how much I can read from that. Fight prior to that, he fought Hamos, and he lost the split decision there. Obviously, there's been some question marks over Ricardo Hamos as well, and what level he's actually at. And then he had that entertaining fight with Guido Kenney as well, which he won via triangle choke. But in the if I remember rightly, he got troubled in the Kenney fight and in the Ishihara fight. Ishihara rocked him early on as well, so he is hittable. And I just think that Brandon Davis is going to be able to land some strikes on Kang in this fight. Brandon Davis is a hard guy to put away. I don't think he's ever been finished via strikes in his career. He's lost a couple of fights via submission. Obviously, one of those been against Zabit Magomed Sharipov, who's a very high-level fighter, and that was a really entertaining fight. Some people argued that Davis won that first round. I don't see that myself, but he certainly put up a good fight for himself. And I just think it's going to be Brandon Davis's utilisation of all those limbs. Like I said, just the pressure he puts on as well. He puts on a good pace. His output is good. He throws a lot of strikes, and I think that's going to look good in the judges' eyes. I think this is actually going to be a really entertaining fight. I think these two are going to throw down. I think this is one of those fights that if he was higher up on the bout order, it could be one of those that could potentially be a fight of the night. But unfortunately, you don't very often see those in those very early prelims. But I think Brandon Davis is going to win a decision in this fight. But yeah, I think it's going to be an entertaining one.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a really fun fight to watch for sure. But I am going the opposite way. I really like Kyung-Ho Kang in general. I think he's a fun fighter to watch. His scrambles, his grappling, he's just really, really high level, and he's so difficult to deal with on the mat. Even when he's on bottom, we've seen him wrap triangles up and then reverse position whilst the triangle's locked into mount with triangles. He's got that sort of crazy game. On the feet, I think Brandon Davis is going to be quite gritty. He's probably going to have a striking advantage. I don't think it's going to be that significant though. But Brandon Davis is a grindy type of fighter. He will like to get in your face. He will like to get involved in the clinch and really push a pace, especially in the division where he is big. But listen, so's Kang as well, as you've already mentioned, John. I just think that when they start clinching up, I think Kang will have opportunities to trip him and drag him to the mat. He did take Ramos down at some point in the second round, I believe, and he spent a lot of time on top with Ramos, not in too much danger. So if Ramos is not submitting him from bottom, I don't think Brandon Davis is going to be. But with Kang, it's weird because he doesn't shoot many takedowns, but the fight always seems to end up on the mat one way or another. And I just feel the same thing's going to happen in this fight. I think the fight's going to hit the mat at some point. I think there's going to be time on the clock. I think the scrambles are going to put Kang in a good position, potentially a finished position, and he's going to take advantage of it. So I'm going to take Kyung-Ho Kang to win. I'm going to take him to win via submission. And in the final fight at UFC 241, we've got Sabina Mazo versus Shayna Dobson. John, who have you got?
Yeah, obviously Sabina Mazo made her UFC debut against Marianne Moros earlier in the year in March, lost the decision there. In that fight, we really saw Moros utilise her experience and that grinding style, and Mazo found it difficult to keep Moros off her and to keep her from clinching her up against the fence, and she wasn't really able to utilise any of her striking or anything like that because she spent so much time with the back against the fence. Now Shayna Dobson comes in to fight off the back of a loss as well against Lauren Mueller. Prior to that, she won the fight against Ariel Bet via strikes. I mean, I think Shayna Dobson is the harder hitting of the two fighters here. Maz, I think, has a slight height and reach advantage, but I think Dobson throws her strikes with a lot more bad intentions. I think she throws with a lot more power, and she's fought some tough some tough girls actually so far in her career. I mean, she's fought Nico Montana and Roxanne Modafferi in the Ultimate Fighter as well. So she's fought some of the losses on her record against tough fighters, and yeah, for me, I just think if Dobson had a look at Morris's game plan, she saw that there was a bit of a weakness with Mazzo getting her back off the fence. I think, like I say, I think that Dobson, if she comes out aggressively and throws heavy hands, I think that'll naturally back Mazzo up, and maybe that'll give her a chance to clinch and spend a bit of time there and see if she can play it out similarly to the Moros fight. But even if they just stand in the middle and decide to scrap it out, I like Dobson's aggressiveness in the strikes more so than I like Mazzo's striking. So I do think that Shayna Dobson is going to come out victorious in this fight. I think her striking will be the difference, and I think she's going to win a decision.
Yeah, I think this fight is going to be quite ugly, to be honest. And it's a tough one to call because I think that Mazzo is going to have learnt a lot from that UFC debut. You know, it was a little underwhelming. Mazzo's obviously got a nice head kick that she utilised a lot in the regional scene that could potentially land on someone like Dobson. I think she's going to have a height advantage and an advantage in the reach in regards to arms and legs as well. So I do think it's a possibility that she does land that head kick. But if she doesn't land a shot that hurts Dobson, or if she doesn't land multiple shots that are really getting in and throwing her off a game, I think Dobson's just going to take over the fight and really come on strong towards the end of the fight. I think her striking on the inside is going to be a little better. She can get on the inside as well. Her boxing's decent. She's also deceptively strong. Like I said with Cyphers, I do think that Dobson's deceptively strong. I do think she can tie up with Mazzo. That is where Mazzo is a weakest, in my opinion. When she's not at range and not striking, that's where she's most uncomfortable inside the cage, is probably the right word to say. So I think that it's a bit of a stretch saying that Mazzo's going to win via a head kick knockout. I don't think it happens. I do think Dobson has to maybe drop around or just use half a round to start figuring the distance and gauge her timings on her shots and when she can start closing the distance into the boxing range. And yeah, I think the longer the fight goes on, I think the more Dobson's going to grow into it. So I've got Shayna Dobson to win. I'm going to take her to win via decision. And that's it for this week's podcast, guys. So, John, before we hit the Newsome MMA mentions, what do you need to mention, man?
Yeah, just as always, hit me up on Twitter if you want to talk anything MMA related, at MMA and me. Always happy to talk to everyone about any subjects in the mixed martial arts world. And if you're down for a chat, just hit me up at MMA and me.
Awesome. So now for the Newsome MMA mentions. First of all, I want to mention the Newsome MMA website. Don't forget to visit the outlet's website at newsomemma.co.uk, where you'll find the locally famous tape index feature, prediction videos, fighter interviews, content collaboration with heavy duty fight management, and you can even request colour commentary and media coverage from Newsome MMA as well. Next up is MMA Play 365, which I spoke about at the start of this podcast. MMA Play 365 is the perfect betting advice platform for any type of gambler, whether you're in this game for the long term or whether you just want some fun bets whilst watching the fights on the night. The goal is to make money, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing for you. So follow MMA Play 365 over on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, or visit MMAplay365.com to subscribe today. The next mention is for the long-term sponsor of Newsome MMA, CBD Life UK. CBD is an amazing product and something that I use myself. Thousands of professional athletes also use CBD too, and at CBD Life UK they've got a wide variety of products to suit the needs of any customer. You can go to cbdlifeuk.com and use promo code Newsome MMA to get 15% off your order. And finally, the final mention is the newest sponsor of Newsome MMA, which is Golden Ticket Fight Promotions. Golden Ticket put on some fantastic MMA shows and are one of the biggest regional promotions in the Midlands over here in the UK. The next event is GTFP 12 at Starworks Warehouse in Wolverhampton on September 28th. Tickets are on sale right now, and you can also follow them on all their social channels, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, to keep up to date with everything Golden Ticket. And that's it from us, guys. Enjoy the fights on Saturday night, and we'll see you again for UFC 242.